So we are going to go out to Ohio. No pronouns given. We've got Caleb and thinks abiogenesis is there we are. Sorry, something happened. Hey, Caleb, you are live talking with Justin and Armin. What is up?
Hi there, guys. Thank you for being so gracious as to answer my call, so that way we'd have the opportunity to discuss this very important and big topic. So anyway, I would like to just kind of state my position, which I think you guys kind of already know, and give the reason why I don't think abiogenesis is possible, and then ask you guys your opinion on it, because I wouldn't want to assume anything and then put up like a straw man or whatever.
Sure, go for it.
So when considering how life begun, there are really only two options, as you guys know. So either it happened naturally, or it didn't. It was like an intelligent source of some kind. I'm not specifying. I'm a Christian, but I'm not specifying here.
Yeah, can I
It's
real
a
quick?
false dichotomy.
Yeah, real quick, Caleb. I wanted to address that too. What Armin was saying. Go ahead, real quick. Just say the false dichotomy thing, Armin.
No, like you say there's only two options. You didn't. Can you demonstrate that you have exhausted all other possibilities?
Well, I mean, it's like there's a natural source, there's a natural cause, which would be something like abiogenesis. But if it's not natural, then what is it? Think about it.
Well, but that's hang on. We can go there in a second. But I just real quick, that wasn't what you said at the beginning, right? And that was why Armin jumped in and why I wanted to jump in too. I'm with you if what you say is either life started naturally or not naturally. I'm comfortable with that. That is a true dichotomy. It's just that, and I'll go ahead and give away the game on my end for you, Caleb. Like, yeah, the next step for me is going to be, what does that mean to be not natural? Like, I don't understand that, and I'm going to need some help, genuinely. But if you want to say, hey, man, life either was created or was not created, or it came about naturally or not naturally, either of those, I'm with you, man.
Right, because it could be possible that abiogenesis, the explanation that we have currently, is not the best explanation, but that there's another naturalistic explanation. So when we make it the dichotomy, either naturalistic or non-naturalistic, I think that's more of a true dichotomy than saying that it was either God or abiogenesis.
What you got, Caleb?
Also, Caleb, are you familiar with the Miller experiment?
What was that?
Are you familiar with the Miller experiment? I just wanted. Are you familiar with the Miller experiment? I just want to know if you know that.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
I know what it is.
So you've seen that experiment, and you still think this is not possible without a God, even though you know experiments kind of indicate that it is possible.
Well, there was another. I was going to actually touch on that. So you guys beat me to it. But anyway. So I was going to kind of like give the reasons now, if you guys would be fine with that, to why I don't think abiogenesis is possible, and why I do think this points to an intelligence. So
to be sure, though, abiogenesis could be wrong, and it still doesn't mean that your God did it, right? So you're only debunking one of the many possible naturalistic explanations. And you're welcome to try it. I'd love for you to try it, but I don't think that gets you to the conclusion you want.
Yeah, and I see that people in the live chat are already saying different things like about magic and stuff like that. And
don't worry about the live chat. We're having a conversation. Yeah, don't worry about the live chat or anything, Caleb. Yeah, just give us your reasons. But
okay. Anyway, so I'm gonna be, and this might cause an eye roll, but I'm reading out of just this little paragraph right here. I'm not going to read like a whole page here. That'd be unreasonable and stupid of me to do. But out of Return of the God Hypothesis by Stephen C. Meyer, and he mentions how origin of life simulation experiments increasingly suggested that simple chemicals do not arrange themselves into complex information-bearing molecules, nor do they move in life-relevant directions unless that is biochemists actively and intelligently guide the process. If undirected chemical processes cannot account for the encoded information found in even the simplest cells, might a directing intelligence have played a role in the origin of life?
Do you, off the top of your head, and it's okay if you don't, because I don't remember either. I'm looking it up right now. Do you know where Stephen C. Meyer teaches?
He went to Cambridge. I think maybe Biola. I don't know.
Okay. That's where you think he teaches currently, right?
I don't know. He got his education from Cambridge, but
Correct.
I might be mixing Biola up with like William Lane Craig or some other person like that.
Yeah, and that's okay. And like I said, I wasn't positive either. He is a former educator, just so we're both on the same page now. Do you know what his degree is in? Because again, I wasn't positive either, Caleb. So I double, triple checked on this too.
Yeah, I know he was a geophysicist, but he studied philosophy of science, correct?
Yeah. PhD in the philosophy of science. He is often cited as an American historian and author. And the only reason I'm saying that to begin with, before we go any further, Caleb, because I'm happy to address the things that were brought up in that paragraph. But if I sat here, Caleb, and I tried to give you an explanation of American history and said, you know, the Revolutionary War, X, Y, Z, and the Continental Congress, whatever, this and that, and the, you know, articles of blah, blah, whatever, right? And you said, hey, man, that's a real interesting thought. Where'd that come from? And I said, a biochemist. How would you feel about everything that was just read to you? That doesn't mean it's wrong, right? But you'd kind of be like, hey, SR, why are you bringing this up to me, man? I don't give a damn what an American historian has to say about abiogenesis, because all of the people in that field, they regularly use Stephen Meyer as an example for bad science. But I'll give you a second to respond on that, and then I'm sure Justin and Armin have some thoughts on what you read. But what do you think about that, Caleb?
I mean, I think it's interesting, but I mean, he's probably still educated within that area. I don't think we should discount it completely. Like, he did study philosophy of science, and I've heard him say some things that I think shows that he has at least, and I'm saying just at least like sort of the sake of argument, some understanding of this, but I don't want to stay on what Stephen C. Meyer as a person or an author or what qualifications he
I totally understand, and I'm not saying that simply because of the things that I mentioned, everything that Stephen C. Meyer says is hot garbage, or that he's a fucking idiot or anything. No, that is not what I am saying, not in the slightest. But I am just pointing out the disparity between what a philosophy of science PhD says about abiogenesis, when there are, for instance, a lot of people in the evolutionary biology field that say everything that he says is wrong. And between the two, if I've got a funky noise going on in my truck, I'm taking it to the mechanic with 20 years experience in the biz, not the guy down the road who like drives a car also. Right. But yeah, Justin, what do you think, man?
Well, it sounds like what is about to happen is an appeal to authority, but like most of the people that are actually authorities in this field of study disagree with who he's about to read from. So if we're going to make appeals to authority, then we could just appeal to the vast majority of molecular biologists and chemists who disagree and say, no, abiogenesis is the most likely hypothesis. And we've got early evidence that it is possible. We find water and amino acids fully formed on meteorites two different times. We've actually captured this from two different meteors. So like we know even in outer space, the building blocks of life, the building blocks of protein are actually self-assembling. So abiogenesis is the next step in that process.
Can I ask something from the caller? So this is actually very simple. None of us here, I'm assuming, are experts in this field. So as non-experts, this is very easy for us to evaluate. when you're not an expert, you use Occam's razor, right? If 99.9% of the experts in a field, again, remember the fallacy is appeal to false authority, not appeal to authority. Like Justin was saying, if we can appeal to authority when we're not experts ourselves, we just use Occam's razor. We say which one is the most likely scenario. If the vast majority of experts say that one theory is the most likely explanation, even if you find some examples of actual experts that disagree with the majority, your expert, apparently based on SR's research, was not really an expert. But even if they were an expert, what would I do as a non-expert? Even if that one expert or 1% of experts are right and the 99% are wrong, I, as a non-expert, I'm justified to believe what the vast majority of experts are saying until evidence shows something else. The most justified position for me to have right now is to accept the position of the vast majority of the experts. Your anecdotal evidence does not change that, does not change that calculation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I still kind of think a little bit that this is sort of a appeal to authority, because you still haven't given me like why do you think I'm wrong?
Wait, but so we haven't gotten yet to anything like specific about a claim yet, Caleb. So like the why do you think I'm wrong thing comes in down the road. We're just setting this up to begin with. And the first thing that happened is you called and said, and I know our wonderful call screeners, so I'm sure this is accurate. You said, hey, I don't think abiogenesis is possible. And they were like, okay, is that what you want to talk about? And you were like, yeah, totally. And we brought you on for that. And the first thing that happened was you set up it's either this or that. And we said, well, hang on a second. We need to fix that a little. And you said, okay, yeah, that's fair. And we moved on. And that next step was you just saying, hey, let me start bringing up some information as to why I don't think it's possible. And all we've done so far is just say, like, the very first person that you mentioned is well known in this space as being considered not a reliable source of information. You give me the claim, man. If your claim is just, hey, I don't think abiogenesis is possible, like, cool story, man. Like, awesome. Go keep saying that, I guess. I don't know what to tell you there, because none of us are biologists or anything. But the evidence, in my opinion, is overwhelmingly in support that, again, like Justin has said, man, maybe we don't have it 100% correct, but it is possible. We have shown that this pathway in some form or fashion works. So like if you're going to say, for instance, there's this one guy, James Torr. He says there is a specific protein that is the problem. There's an enzyme that you just can't get. You just can't do it without God. If that's the route you want to go, like, yeah, cool, we'll talk about that. Like we can go down that route. But so far, all we've got is just, hey, I don't think it's possible. And if we just stop right there, Caleb, that's just the fallacy of incredulity, right? It's just me saying, man, I can't think of how it could work like that. And so I guess it just doesn't. But that's not a good reason to believe that.
Also, when you said we appeal to authority, again, that's not, as I mentioned, that's not a fallacy. Appeal to false authority is a fallacy. Right. As non-experts, we have to appeal to fallacy unless we all go here and set up our own labs and do the experiments from scratch. We have no choice but to appeal to authority.
I don't know, Armin. I think we should tell everybody to set up their own biology labs in their houses and start doing experiments on their own. I think that's the world we should live in. No, I'm kidding. I'm teasing.
But Caleb, to the point that we've kind of already mentioned, and I want to be as charitable to you as possible, like even if, let's just imagine that the current theory of abiogenesis doesn't seem to be plausible, it still doesn't mean that your God did it. Like you would still need to demonstrate that your God was the thing that caused life to come into being, because it might be that there is some sort of metaphysical necessity, and that metaphysical necessity that caused life was still a naturalistic cause. We would still need the evidence that it was a God as opposed to a different naturalistic phenomenon. So like we can even just grant you right now, cool. Okay. We don't know if abiogenesis is true. What's the next step in the argument? How do you get to your God doing it?
Yeah.
Good point, Justin.
Okay. So the way I specifically get to the Christian God is based off of different pieces of evidence which have to do with like text and stuff like that, which is irrelevant to like this specific conversation, which is why
it's very relevant
at this point in the argument. I'm saying I use points like an intelligent cause. Like before we can start moving on to the Christian God, first, how do we even know if there is an intelligent cause? Source.
Right. So I understand that mode of operation in this space, and this is a fairly standard way to have this conversation. You can go see quite a lot of people doing this for a really, really long time. And it makes sense to me. And I think it makes sense to most people because it feels like we're building to something. We're going from the general to the specific, right? Because once we can get to the stage of just agreeing that there's an intelligent cause, then we can say, hey, it's my intelligent. I understand that, right, Caleb? Here's my problem with it. In these examples, I feel like it is very obvious that the individual that is going through that process has already brought in assumptions from their specific God. And so unless we do have the understanding of your particular version, the attributes that apply exclusively to what your intelligent cause is, we're going to struggle because there are aspects of this that you're bringing in. Because, a lot of people will say, like the Kalam, they'll say, well, it's got to be timeless, it's got to be shapeless, it's got to be. No, it doesn't. That is Craig bringing in this understanding that he already has of his God. And that's how he gets to those conclusions. There are a bunch of versions of God that don't have anything to do with that. And there could be a bunch of versions of the start of the universe that don't have those attributes either, right? But yeah, I think it is really important at the end of the day, because you don't just believe in, a shapeless, formless, intelligent cause, in air quotes. You believe in a specific God.
But let's make it easy for him. Let's go with Justin's question and just remove all that. Let's just assume that, your first, claim is correct, and it's not possible. Give us a God from that claim, answer Justin's question, and it doesn't have to be the Christian God. It just has to be a self-aware entity that created the universe, that has some form of intelligence. We made your job very easy. We assumed your first claim, and we don't need you to get us to the Abrahamic God. Let's see if you can get us there.
But I would ask one question about this God, even though it's a nondescript God. Is it your belief that the God created literally everything other than himself, or did anything else pre-exist, like time or space?
Good question.
Okay, well, so about this, it's impossible for us to, it would be impossible for us to understand everything about the being that would have literally, if it's according to the Bible, but I probably shouldn't say that. But sorry, I kind of lost what I was saying here. It's impossible for us to know everything about God, is what I would be trying to say. So, I mean,
wait, can you get to answering the question? Like, I think like we're getting off.
Did your God also create time and space, or did he just create like the stuff that you and I see?
Well, I mean, I think that it will create it all. And you mentioned Dr. Craig. And so I actually like some of the stuff that he says.
All right, but
so
that's a tangent. We don't need to. We don't need meta commentary on William Lane Craig. He's a fantastic human being, but he's not relevant to the discussion, right?
Yeah.
So to me, like, even if you go to the most basic attributes of the God that you believe in, it tends to fall apart, right? Because we have this entity that exists outside of space and time, but he can't exist anywhere because there's no space for him. He can't exist for any amount of time because there's no time for him to exist. And he also can't act. The idea that something is existing atemporally, but they can't actually do anything is a bit of a problem, because time is the ability to sequence events, which means your God can't create, he can't think, he can't even think to himself and have a thought, because that's a sequence of events. You can't have sequencings of events outside of time. So even the most baseless attribute, which is that there was once only God and then God created everything else, it's kind of a nonsensical claim, because like, to think that God created something, the act of creation requires time to already exist. So it's just a non-starter. At some point, you have to come to the drawing board and say, okay, well, something must have existed alongside of God, and it appears to be space-time. But that concession is going to lead to other concessions, which I can nearly guarantee. Do you understand how it's literally impossible for something to exist without time?
Well, I've heard some people, like, for example, there's this one guy, his name is Greg Kokel. He actually has a call-in show, sort of the opposite of this, like a Christian one. And he was talking about how he thinks that God is within some sort of time frame, like, or whatever.
Yes.
But I don't.
He must be, yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about abiogenesis. Can I say something else about abiogenesis?
But we could just grant you that abiogenesis is a flawed theory. Cool. Let's talk about your God, because abiogenesis could be wrong. It still doesn't mean that your God exists.
Does that make sense, Caleb? I want to stick on that for just a second, because I think that is a really, really important point, and I want to make sure that we're all four on the same page with what Justin just said. Can you say that again, Justin, and then Caleb, I want to hear your response.
Yeah, abiogenesis. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, bud.
No, you go ahead. And I just want to say, pay attention to what Justin is saying, and see if you could actually answer the question instead of going into another direction or explaining another person or talking about the attributes of your God. So pay very close attention to what Justin is saying and see if you could actually directly answer the question. But go on, Justin. Sorry.
So let's grant you right now that we have no way to conclude whether or not abiogenesis is a viable theory. Let's just take it off the table and say, you know what, we'll grant you that maybe it's not workable. Cool. But what is the evidence that would put your God as the source now? Because it could be a different naturalistic cause. So in order to make a claim that something was in fact the cause, we would need a pattern of evidence that would lead us to that conclusion.
You guys remember what I was saying earlier? I said it's an intelligent cause is where the argument starts right now. And I would like to talk about the information and how I think that does point to an intelligent cause. I didn't call to talk about what God this is. I called to talk about different, and like, I know we already settled and mentioned abiogenesis, but I wanted to talk about different things like the information within DNA, which I think helps point us to some sort of.
Okay, well, show us how the information within the DNA shows that there's some intelligence and that it requires an intelligence as the cause. Yeah. Are you going to show us that, or are you going to basically keep telling us that what you're talking about? Like, show us the evidence that the information within the DNA requires an intelligence behind it for it to exist. Show us that.
Let's do that, Caleb. Okay.
So,
and we can give you a minute if you want.
Okay.
We'll give you a full minute, and you can lay it all out to us. When the minute's up, we'll unabashedly come in and interrupt. But you got 60 seconds.
Okay. So an important component of life is information, and so DNA, the RNA, and all this, it's been compared to many times to a code, a digital code. And so it's not literally a code in itself, but it's information about, like, even the simplest of organisms have tons of this information in it. And where does information come from? It comes from like a book that has a bunch of information in it, and it's specified. Specified complexity is the word for that information that is in there. Meaning, not only is it complex, but it also conveys sort of like a message. Like there's been I think it was a 4-letter code. I can't remember what the letters were. I think it was like A, T, something or other.
That's awesome. That we're right at a minute, and that's awesome, Caleb. Because honestly, that was going to be my first question, and I'm gonna throw it to Armin here in just a second. Do you know what the 4 coding bases are for DNA in humans? You were about to mention them, I think. Do you know the letters for them, real quick?
Was it A, T? I can't remember the letters.
A, T, C, and G. That's really good. That's really good. And then here's a really, really cool fact, and I'll ask a question. And just no worries if you don't know. Not a big deal. Again, none of us are biologists. I just want to know this. But really cool fact is they actually only pair up to the exact same one every time. Like they don't just flip around, right? There's a certain pairing that one of them always goes towards the other one, you know? And so that's like why we know if we just have one half of the strand, we can actually figure out the other half because it has to be paired to this other one. Do you know why they do that? Do you know what the reason is that they pair like that and they only pair up with the other one?
Not necessarily. No.
Okay, cool. No worries. I'm sure we'll touch on it in a little bit. But I just think that's really, really interesting, man. Go ahead, Armin. What you got?
No, I just want to ask Carl a question. Do you actually think that the things that you just said was providing evidence? So you said that there is things that could be described as information in nature, and when people call it code, basically they're saying it that there are things that are like code because they're information in nature. Okay, I will give you that. There are things in nature that you could describe as information. And then you said, given that this is information, it requires intelligence. Do you think that you provided evidence, or did you just repeat the claim, and repeating the claim sounded like providing evidence to you? Which one do you think, which one of these scenarios do you think is true? Was that actual evidence?
I mean, I think so. I think that points towards intelligent calls, because where does information come from?
Well, that's what your claim is. You're claiming that information always requires intelligence behind it. You're assuming that. You haven't demonstrated that. We're asking for a demonstration of that necessity.
Right. And I think one of the other problems we have here is defining what you mean by information, because so I'm a programmer myself. My day job is as an electrical engineer, but I spend most of my time programming software. And so the fact that something is necessarily complicated doesn't mean that it qualifies as information, right? So we've got very complex non-living molecules out in the world, and we wouldn't call that information. You're really only calling the DNA information because it's part of our living biology. But like you wouldn't call, the crystalline process of a bismuth crystal, you wouldn't say that that is information. But under the definition that you're providing, the crystalline structure that is necessary for forming bismuth crystals is technically information. It's a particular sequence of molecules. And if you don't have that sequencing of molecules, you don't have bismuth.
I mean, based on their definition of information, I'm okay calling it. They call any type of pattern by that definition of information. Any pattern could be described as, I could randomly put three rocks in the ground. And I'm like, well, this is an information, and if I move it, it's a different information. Anything in any sort of pattern in nature could be described as information or data. But I think what you're saying, Caleb, is because we have this is what you're thinking, because this resembles code, and our experience is that there's a coder behind a code. Therefore, if there's something in nature that resembles a code, there needs to be an intelligent coder behind it. That seems to be your argument. You're basically generalizing your experience. You see the human experience, and you see things in nature that resembles things that we have created. This is basically the watch argument. We look at a watch, and like, oh, this seems to be organized and complex. Oh, who created the watch? Humans. Okay, this tree is complex. Oh, if we created the watch, then somebody must have created this tree. And you're doing the same thing with the DNA. You're looking at the DNA like, oh, this looks like code to me. Well, we have codes in our experiences. Who's behind the code? There's humans behind the code. Okay, therefore the code behind the DNA, there must be an intelligence. Do you understand how wrong this is and how basic this is, and how you're just generalizing your own personal human experience to everything in nature?
Well, it's not just that it's complex. Like if you blop a bunch of ink on a piece of paper, it's going to be a very complex design. It would be hard to replicate. But if you saw in the ink that something had been wrote in it, then you would assume intelligence, because that's specified complexity, it's called.
Why are you assuming intelligence? You keep saying that without showing any evidence. You're assuming intelligence. I'm not assuming intelligence. You're doing that. Why are you acting like the rest of us are doing it? Why are you assuming intelligence whenever you see something that is complex?
I'm assuming it, and no, it's not just that it's complex. I just said this. It's not that it's
whatever it is.
It's specified, and that's how that there's a huge
whatever. Why would that mean intelligence? You know you're just describing things without getting to the why. Well, you're not answering the why.
Well, information comes from a mind.
Why? Let's stick to that, Caleb. Okay. You know what? I'm on board with you, Caleb. Information comes from a mind, but I'm kind of an idiot, Caleb, and I don't exactly understand how. Help me.
And the inference is not there. You're saying that because we witness information being created by a mind, we can infer that the DNA, if it is information, was made by a mind. But this is an inference from things that we know. But we can make the same inference against your God. We can say, well, we know that all minds are contingent on a brain. And so by inference, God must have a physical matter brain, but you would reject that. So like we would reject your inference on the same reason why you would reject our inference about God's brain being the mind that causes the information.
Okay.
So like this disembodied floating mind that's just out in the ether is a nonsensical idea to begin with, because you're suggesting that there must be a mind that created this, because we know that information comes from minds. But when we examine the nature of God's mind, it's completely unfeasible. It's not a realistic idea of what a mind actually is. So the analogy kind of falls apart. But it's also true that if God is a programmer, he's like
a transcendent being.
Right, but you have no evidence that transcendent anything exists. There's no proof that there's any such thing as transcendentals. Right. You're assuming that they exist.
You're adding extra things on, Caleb.
If God does exist and he's a programmer, then he's not a good programmer. The DNA code is suspect. It has like a huge amount of unvaluable coding that just gets passed down. It's easily damaged. That's why we've got so many retroviruses in our genome. And then we pass the damage on down the line. So like if we have an all-knowing creator, I would expect that he would have the DNA code in a way that it could actually self-clean. It can self-regulate when things come in, but it doesn't. It actually takes in all the damage and passes it forward.
Yeah. Caleb, I know we've shouted a lot at you, man, and I'm sure you've got a lot of responses too. But we've been going for quite a while, which I do appreciate you. You know, I feel like go ahead real quick.
One sentence, Caleb. Can you I know you must be familiar with appeal to ignorance. You're saying because I cannot think of a way that information comes from anything other than intelligence, then it must be intelligence. This is a standard example of appeal to ignorance. You're failing to see how could this the patterns that you're seeing is coming from anything other than intelligence, so it must be from intelligence. That's what you're doing. But go on, sorry.
Yeah. No. I appreciate that.
Can I ask Caleb a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Then we'll wrap up.
Caleb, you've called in to Atheist Experience and The Line and a few other shows before, haven't you? Because I've heard you give...
Not The Line.
I've heard you give this actual talking point at least more than once before. And it didn't land when I saw you give it prior. So I guess I'm trying to figure out why you're here now. You're back at the well thinking the same argument is going to land somewhere else when it doesn't land elsewhere. Like, yeah. Do you understand how going back to the same broken argument is not a good tactic for winning hearts and minds to your theistic point of view?
Yeah. And I know
I would blame it.
Go ahead. Finish up.
I was saying I think it's me. I think I would blame it on myself.
Fair enough.
Haven't done.
Yeah, I don't think so, Caleb, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work when other people try it either. From what I've seen, I think it's just not a strong argument, man. But I know we shouted a lot at you during this whole thing. I'm going to tell you to do something, Caleb. And I mean, you can just go tell me to, fuck myself, of course, right? But I think this is an incredibly important practice that we should all get in the habit of doing. Go back and watch this after the fact. Give it a day or two, man. Put it down. Don't think about it. Go hang out outside or whatever. Screw around. Buy presents for whatever. It doesn't matter. But then come back and rewatch this and listen to our responses and your responses and where we take the conversation and stuff. And then give us a call back, man, because we always appreciate good conversation like it. But I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much, Caleb. We do appreciate you.